And just like that, the offseason is over. Welcome back to the Matt Barrie Show here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. I hope everyone enjoyed what should have been a long offseason. Seems like it went away in about 3 weeks since January 11th, the national championship game. A lot of stuff to get to because media days and talking seasons going on. Of course, we got the expanded 12-team college football playoff. We've got the SEC going away from divisions, also adding two other teams rather. We've got a 2-minute warning in college football, along with so many other things to get to in the sport that seems to evolve by the minute. So who else would we bring in than the man, the myth, the Finebaum, who joins us now from Dallas, SEC Media Days. Paul, I said this on SportsCenter yesterday, and I want this audience to hear it. There is not an SEC Media Days without Paul Finebaum. What number is this for you?
Of course, we missed one. That would be COVID. But Matt, my first one was 1985. So I think I'm somewhere at, 39 maybe?
39 SEC.
Yeah.
I would love to do the math one day of how many coaches have been fired under the watchful eye of Paul Finebaum since attending SEC Media Days.
Yeah, I mean, I think I personally fired about 10 or 11. It's pretty remarkable. And what I really miss, and I don't want to wax poetic about the good old days, is the greatest thing that ever happened was predated SEC Media Days. It was called the SEC Skywriters Tour, Matt. I'm sure you've heard of it, where they took 2 planes and got a bunch of sports writers, and they were gone for 10 days. And they'd go to 2 campuses a day, and they had an embargo. Nobody could write or broadcast until it was over. So it was one long drunk and debauchery fest. And Matt, when I tell you, I mean, we're talking the days of the Roman Empire in terms of the sleaze. It finally ended one year. I think it was '84. They had a toga party in the middle of the night in Lexington, Kentucky, where everybody dressed up in sheets and started doing togas and shots. And 2 sports writers got into a brawl, and the SEC said, "That's it." And it entered a new era. I helped bring in the new and the morality of the moral majority of the SEC.
Who knew that you scribes could send it that way? I mean,
Yeah.
Who knew that you, Wojciechowski, and Ivan Maisel could just roll it out there and keg stand it until the wee hours of the morning?
I have a friend who thought about doing a documentary, but it was going to ruin a lot of lives. I mean, Matt, you've heard the stories. I'm not going to discuss them publicly because there's still some family. There may still be some 95-year-old sports writers who don't want to be humiliated.
You know what? Good for them. And now from the SkyTrack SEC Media Days to the show that is in Dallas, Texas, we know SEC does everything bigger and better than any league. They added 2 teams this year in Texas and Oklahoma. And I want to start there as we look at the big picture, really, of talking season here in Media Days. Because to me, you have 2 teams that are quite equipped to enter the league. But right now, Texas, Paul, seems to be the team that everyone's talking about, because I don't know where you stand on them. I have them 1A behind Georgia.
I think you have to, Matt. And I've been in Austin a couple of times lately, and they're confident. I mean, of course, they're always confident, but this is legitimate. This isn't a we're back type of deal that you've heard too often in Texas history. And Sarkisian just went in there, and everybody acts like, man, this is a big deal. You know, what's funny about Sarkisian, I've heard many of my brethren down here, you know, as a Nick Saban disciple, have we forgotten that he got to start under Pete Carroll? I mean, yeah. who wasn't, I thought, a pretty good coach back in the day. But that's the power really of Saban. Both Kiffin and Sark are Saban disciples, even though they really cut their teeth at USC under Pete Carroll.
Yeah. Both of them, they were the young coordinators and quarterback coaches and offensive guys under Pete Carroll on that run with Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush.
Not a bad run.
No, and now both of them are in the SEC, and both of them, speaking of Texas and Ole Miss at Lane Kiffin respectively, I mean, you look at the league, it has a real opportunity to get quite a few teams in the college football playoff. We'll get to that in a minute. But Texas comes in, Quinn Ewers is back. They dominated in the transfer portal. They got Isaiah Bonds from Alabama, who's a top flight receiver. They bring in a smaller kid who I think is going to be a stud, in Silas Bolden out of Oregon State. So, Paul, of the 2, I think that Texas really landed themselves in a much better preparatory spot to handle the rigors of an SEC schedule.
Yeah, and yeah, the schedule is critical. I mean, these are everybody doesn't have the same schedule, and Texas has a pretty favorable schedule. Now they do have two what I would call really tricky games that you
Yeah.
wouldn't think about. One at Arkansas, one at A&M. I mean, two. Arkansas is a bottom division team, but that's a rivalry, Matt, that wakes up the echoes of college football. They played in one of the most important games in the history of the sport in 1969, and then they play at A&M at the end of the season. And you've lived in the state. Uh, I hear more about that game from Aggies than any game I've heard about in a long time. And by the way, I say that considering they opened the season against Notre Dame. I'm not saying that game's an afterthought. I mean, game day, the whole 9 yards will be there.
Yeah.
But they want Texas so badly. It's palatable, and Texas has so many big games. I mean, Oklahoma and all these other games, and they have Georgia in the middle
When you have to
of
go
the month.
to Michigan's another one.
Yeah,
I think they'll be
yeah,
fine in that one, but it's an atmosphere.
yeah. No, I mean that's a game like that should be like the game of the year in the early part of the college football season. You may be the first person that's mentioned it all week.
SEC bias. See, you guys go down there to Dallas, and your network's out there all damn
Oh
day
yeah.
doing 50 hours of TV. Okay, so that's kind of a natural segue. I don't want to pivot to Oklahoma just yet because there you have Texas A&M, who thought they were getting away from the Texas issue when they joined the SEC, thumping their chest. We're in the conference that just means more. You stay in the little Big 12. Now Texas, big bad Texas, coming off a playoff performance, comes in. Mike Elko, now the head coach at Texas A&M. He's a first-year guy. He wasn't the glitz glamour of Jimbo Fisher, but he's got a lot of substance. And so because we're talking about the rivalry between A&M and Texas, I think Texas A&M with talent could be a team that we're looking at kind of sideways middle of the season of having a really, really good first year under a really, really good football coach.
I agree. And I know you've been around Elko a lot, and he's been quiet because there's just been so much conversation about the other Texas school. But A&M still has some players. I mean, they don't have everyone from 2 years ago and that Jimbo Fisher class, but they have a few, and I think they'll be a factor. I'll try to avoid all the cliches that I hear downstairs where I am ad nauseum. But I mean, there's like everybody's got a game or two that if you can turn that game, you're in really good shape. And A&M has a lot of winnable games against middle of the road SEC schools, and if they do, then that game against Texas on Thanksgiving weekend is going to be incredibly significant for more than just beating Texas.
Sometimes programs look at the sizzle of a hire, right? They look at how shiny the toy is and look who we got. Otherwise, it's probably safe sometimes just to hire substance, hire a good football coach. And so I think that's where the Elko hire is going to go. And I think A&M down the road is going to be one of these teams that we're talking about with Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Texas, that are going to be these teams that are going to find themselves among the upper echelon of the SEC because they should have resources.
Yeah, I mean, every time I go to A&M, Matt, I just don't understand why they're so inconsistent. Because I mean, they are not Texas, but nobody is in terms of the money and the
Right.
but they're not far behind Texas when it comes to money. I mean, they're in the same zip code, but they have everything, and they've got one of the most unique fan bases. The tradition. It's baffling to me, except that they went all in on the wrong guy. They got a guy who, by the time Jimbo Fisher made it to College Station, he was damaged goods, and he took the check, and that's really about it.
He's like a live golfer. Jimbo is
Yeah,
to college football, but live.
I agree.
He took the check, and there you didn't hear much from him after that. No offense,
Yeah,
Bryce DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka. That's another podcast here and there.
yeah.
At Oklahoma, just because they're a newcomer, I want to get to them. Year 2 under Brent Venables much better than year 1. I know a lot of people question whether Brent Venables could be a quality head coach. Levy goes to Mississippi State. He's the new head coach down there. He's got to bring in a new offensive coordinator. Dylan Gabriel transfers to Oregon, but they got a really young, talented quarterback they love. That was a true freshman a year ago. Here's where I am with Oklahoma, Paul. Oklahoma has the tradition and the ability to be a problem in the SEC. Year 1, I don't know that that's going to be the case.
No, I don't think they are going to be this year, but they are certainly uh, going to be in the future. I can't tell you enough about that program in terms of how they run that operation, what they believe, and I think Joe Castiglione, the highly regarded AD
Yeah.
out there, he said, you know what, I'm not going to get caught up in a circus game of, you know, is Brent Venables going to be the right coach or not? I'm going to go ahead and extend him right now. And if I take the heat later on, who cares? I mean, he's got the credibility, he's got the capital. He's not going to be there forever. And so I think he just gambled. And I like Venables. I mean, I know we'll get to the subject in a few minutes, but look at Clemson without Brent Venables. I mean, that
Yeah.
program has taken a big hit. It may have taken one anyway, but he was one of the most important coordinators to a big time program I've seen in a while.
And look, and stability sometimes in the SEC is something we don't necessarily see, although programs want it. I'm looking down the list right now. You got a new coach at Mississippi State and Levy. I just mentioned that. You've got a new coach at Texas A&M and Elko, and a new coach at the biggest program in the SEC, which we'll pivot to there, and Kalen DeBoer, because after 17 seasons, Nick Saban retired. He's now your colleague and my colleague here at ESPN. Let's start from the Saban perspective first. He said with me on SportsCenter the other day, and I know you guys have talked about it extensively in the SEC Network. I said, how much have you been involved since you retired? And he said, I'm available. I've been available. I've talked with them. How much, Paul, are you hearing having Saban's presence still there has helped this transition of power at Alabama?
I think it's helped the most in recruiting. I mean, I really don't think Kalen DeBoer needs Nick Saban for X's and O's advice, but recruiting is critical. And I've seen a number of 5 stars in recent weeks commit to Alabama, and I feel pretty confident that Saban's probably played a role. I mean, nobody should be surprised by anything the guy does, but I mean, he's very artfully transitioned into this new role. He seems to like it so far, but I know that he's made calls, but I don't think he's actively involved. I mean, he showed up at DeBoer's press conference. He showed up at the spring game. A couple of eyebrows were raised, and you know, why is he here? But I think he wants them to know, if you need me, I'm here. He probably really doesn't want to be bothered that much because he's been there before. But I think he's still kind of like, I don't know how to describe. I mean, he's still somewhat the coach, but he's not the coach. That's very poor English for a guy that used to make a living writing. But his shadow is still there. But I think DeBoer has had as smooth an offseason as I've ever seen. He took a hit the first week. He lost Caleb Downs.
Yeah.
He lost Julian Sayin, the incoming, the
Yeah.
great freshman. A couple other players, but he's made up for it. I mean, he may not have completely. I mean, you don't make up for losing Caleb Downs, who went to Ohio State. He's not only a 5 star, but he's like an elite difference maker 5 star.
Saying, yeah.
But I think they talk, but I think Saban's really into this new job, and you know, the colleague thing is a little bit overdone. I don't know about you, Matt. I've been in a lot of green rooms with you at national championship games. I've never seen like 4 guys hover over you, like, and I'm not going to mention their names, but you know one of them. He's got another. I mean, he literally can't move without these 4 guys, or 3 or 4 guys following him everywhere he goes. He's got his own guy and an ESPN guy, and then there's just like a guy that goes along for the ride. So I mean, he still feels like the center of attention. But he's good. I mean, nobody ever doubted he'd be a good analyst, but he where it really will be interesting is when he shows up on sets with other people who have done cursory preparation, and he's been studying for 6 months.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that'll happen. And it'll be interesting to see, because he's still as prepared as anyone, even in his new life. And as for Coach DeBoer, Paul, I think when this thing all settles, we're going to look at Kalen DeBoer as an absolute gift and home run for Alabama. Having said that, like any new coach, it could take a little while for the system to be implemented. But all things considered, I don't think there's going to be that, oh man, we hired the wrong guy to fill it. This isn't going to be Ron Zook after Steve Spurrier
No.
at Florida. This is a home run.
He's prepared for everything except one thing, and that's what happens if chaos reigns. And I'll spare you the Mike Tyson quote that I'm sick of by now. But let's say he loses a game. There's no way to prepare for the culture that is Alabama on the Monday after a loss. You and I have had that conversation many times on this podcast. I've been with you on Sports Center after one of those, and there are certain days that you just cannot describe because the Alabama. I mean, I was asked by somebody, what's the expectation level for Alabama this year? And I wasn't being flippant. This wasn't like a first take, hot take. I said it's playoff or bust because it is. There's no sugarcoating. Yeah, I mean, you don't go, well, we went 8-4, but kind of Billy Napier it, like we're building some character. I think Kalen DeBoer tries that, he'll get run out of town, but he won't try that, and he probably won't have to. But just check back with me after all, and including myself. That first loss, let's say it's Wisconsin.
Yeah,
you don't even know that game's on the schedule. I mean, and I'm not trying to inject myself into the conversation here, but you've heard the Finebaum show after an Alabama loss.
Oh, and it's must listen and must watch TV. And
yeah.
Look, and we saw what he did with, I mean, half of his offense from Washington's a first-round pick in the NFL. And so, look, getting talent at Alabama is not going to be an issue. He's going to cultivate that talent. I think we're going to look at this hire unless something goes horribly wrong 3 years down the road and be like, damn, Alabama. All right, so with the 12-team playoff, I'll ask it to you this way. How many teams from the SEC get in the new 12-team playoff?
I think it's not even a conservative answer. I think probably the correct answer is 4.
Yep.
It's not more than 4.
Nope.
And by the way, I mean, all my sycophantic friends down below, are probably saying 14,
6.
16. I mean, I don't mean to blast my friends in the media. Most of them don't even know what the system's. I mean, it's a convoluted system, as you've discussed 1,000 times. It's hard to get more than 4. It could be 3, but I think it's somewhere 3.7 would be my guess.
I would say for me, Georgia in, Texas in, Ole Miss 10-2 in, and then I think you're fighting for that 4th spot between Alabama, Missouri, and LSU.
Yeah, and
I think those are the 3 you have to watch.
And don't forget, Missouri is on Alabama's schedule this year.
Missouri's
yeah. And I was with Drink yesterday, Coach Drinkwitz, and he has come in here like a clown before, cracking jokes, calling media guys out. He was like right at the Chamber of Commerce yesterday. Had the black suit and the gold and black tie, and was just going out of his way to be boring. I mean, he finally cracked a joke or two, but it was about me. It wasn't about him. And Matt, you know more coaches than I do. When coaches do that, they know what they've got. They don't need to be a clown. They're just protecting the turf.
That's it. And Luther Burden's back. Brady Cook, the quarterback's back. I mean, there's a lot of talent back. So I think those 3 teams that we discussed, 10-2 gets you in this thing. All right.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, I think have the talent to be at least 10-2. And then I think you're going to see Alabama just only because the questions of the new head coach and how does that system take. I think that's the only question mark with them. LSU, I think Garrett Nussmeier, I'm all in on him. I think he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. Yeah. And then just trying to figure out what happens with Missouri if last year wasn't a 1-year aberration. All right, stepping out of the SEC, want to get a couple more things before we get out of here in our preseason look at the college football season here on the Matt Barrie Show, ESPN College Football YouTube channel. ACC Media Days get started next week. The ACC, as we know, last year, Florida State. That story is going to continue to linger. They've got the Week 0 game in Ireland against Georgia Tech. Clemson and Dabo Swinney, like you said, haven't been the same since the coordinator switch, since Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence. But then Dabo made a comment about unintended consequences of a 12-team college football playoff. He's also been very vocal about NIL. He's also been very vocal about transfer portal. It just doesn't seem, Paul, at this point that we can make Dabo Swinney happy.
I mean, just shut up, Dabo. I mean, what is Dabo? 50 years old. He's the get off your lawn guy down the street. I mean, he's a crotchety old man who just can't stay out of his own way. And I mean, a couple of years ago, I just think this guy was smart. I mean, he was funny, and you had to talk to him about issues, and he made common sense. It was a little extreme at times, but now he's against everything. I mean, we are years into this playoff, Matt. We've dissected it 1,000 ways, and suddenly Dabo realizes, oh man, you might want to rest your starters. You might want to do this. I mean, what's the biggest show in the world every year? It's the NFL playoffs, and that's where we are. It's not identical, but it's close.
Yeah.
And yeah, everybody's going to deal with the same thing, except Dabo. You're probably not going to have to worry about it because you're not going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, Clemson was just, they were so unstoppable in that run. And look, they're still having really good seasons, but based on where they were and the expectations they had, it'll be interesting to see them. DJ Uiagalelei, now the quarterback at Florida State. What do they do for a bounce back year? I think Miami is on the up. I think they're going to be really good. And I said this when I was hosting your favorite program, Get Up, last week. I said when I was hosting that I think Virginia Tech could be the team in the ACC that we're looking at in November. Like, man, where did they come from? Very favorable schedule. So ACC, we'll get into them as we get closer to the season, but their media days get started next week. And then there's the Big Ten that now includes Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA. And I look at this league, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. We are in this predicament with no Pac-12 because of USC. USC got this whole thing started because they were getting impatient and nervous about the media negotiations that were going on with the Pac-12 and the television networks. So they led the charge to jump ship. Now Lincoln Riley and USC have to deal with jumping ship regionally to a place where I'm from the West Coast. I don't know that LA kids going up to East Lansing, Michigan, and some of these other cold climates in the Big Ten with a different kind of player was the best move, but here we are, the new Big Ten led by USC.
Yeah, and listen, you know where I live, and everybody loves to say that we're the only league that matters. But I think the Big Ten is on a fairly similar plane with the SEC right now, and I think, Matt, anybody who says that otherwise is just being a fanboy. I am really impressed with what they've done up there from a television standpoint, from an acquisition standpoint, and really the last thing that they did, which was Oregon and Washington, was probably the best thing that they've done.
Yeah,
it was a perfect storm. So I'm all in on that league. I think everybody knows, we have two leagues and everyone else, but I don't think we've had this much parity at the top in a long time.
And I would say, first of all, I think Ohio State's the most talented team in the country, top to bottom. I think they're absolutely loaded. It's kind of a now or never season for Ryan Day, but I think top to bottom, Ohio State's got the most talent in the country. But Paul, I believe the newcomer Oregon and Ohio State are going to be playing for the Big Ten championship. Oregon is absolutely loaded. Absolutely. And Dan Lanning's the guy. He's staying put. He's going to build that thing now that they're in the Big Ten. In fact, I would think that Oregon might have more sustainable success in the Big Ten faster than USC and Lincoln Riley.
Oh, easy. Listen, we don't have enough time left. We'll talk about Lincoln Riley every Sunday during the football season. But you're right. Dan Lanning is the guy. We all thought he was going to Alabama, and then he gets, an $8 billion Jeff Bezos-like increase. And he's the story.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun to watch. I think that, as you said, it's a two-team league. I can't get you out of here and release you back to SEC Media Days without asking you this. He was Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year for a 4-8 football team. He's as entertaining as it gets. He's entering year 2 at Colorado as they make the transition to the Big 12. Paul, if I asked you to bet your salary on it, would you bet your salary on Deion Sanders having a winning record at Colorado this year?
I don't think they will. Matt, I don't want to turn this into a attack game here, but Deion Sanders is a standalone figure. He's a celebrity. He's a Hollywood celebrity masquerading as a head football coach. I admire what he's done. He's inspired a lot of people. His son and Travis Hunter are great. But, I mean, when you look at the numbers, I mean, there's nothing to get excited about. I told somebody the other day I thought the University of Colorado in the big picture of college football was irrelevant. Deion cracked back at that. Good for Deion. I don't care. But once we get into the season, you and I aren't going to be talking about them anymore. I'll let Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp and The Rock and every other celebrity in the world show up on the sidelines. But I'm going to be talking about the teams that matter in college football, and Colorado is not one of them.
And year 2 is much different. Year 1, he caught the college football world by storm because of their start. And now you really have to settle in. It's like, okay, year 1, we had game day. Fox had their show there. I believe GMA, they were all there. Now it's time to settle in and see what kind of program he can build. Paul, thank you so much. I know you're busy out there in Dallas at SEC Media Days. So good to talk to you again here on the Matt Barrie Show. Cannot wait to get into this season, but we are getting closer. Talking season has begun around college football. We'll see you next time here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel.
Give me something I can feel.